The rain stopped just as they lowered Ernie Creed into the ground. Harlan stood at the edge of the grave, his black suit pressed sharp as a blade. He watched the mahogany casket disappear into the earth and felt nothing. Not grief, not loss, just the cold calculation that had kept him alive through 3 tours in Afghanistan. Harlan, the minister's voice cut through his thoughts. Would you like to say a few words? He stepped forward. The crowd of 200 faces turned toward him, bankers, politicians, business owners who had built Asheville alongside his father. Old money mixed with new ambition, all waiting to hear emotion from a man who had buried it years ago. My father built an empire on 2 principles, Harlan began, his voice carrying across the cemetery without strain. Work and consequences. He believed a man's legacy wasn't measured by his intentions, but by what he left behind that couldn't be destroyed. He paused, scanning the crowd. His wife, Brielle, stood 30 feet away with their children, her black dress perfectly tailored, her expression unreadable. She hadn't looked at him once during the service. Ernie Creed demanded excellence because he knew the world demands payment for weakness. He never apologized for that. Neither will I. Harlan stepped back. No tears, no breaking voice, just truth delivered like ammunition. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring about the brevity of his words. Harlan remained by the grave as dirt began to fall. He heard footsteps behind him, but didn't turn. That was cold, even for you. Brielle's voice held the same tone she used when discussing disappointing stock returns. He turned to face her. At 42, she still commanded attention, auburn hair, green eyes that missed nothing, the kind of beauty that opened doors and closed deals. She had been his greatest acquisition and his most expensive mistake. Truth usually is, he said. She reached in her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Speaking of truth, Harlan took the papers, scanning the first page. Divorce petition, filed 3 days ago, before his father was even buried. The estate comes to me, Brielle said, stepping closer. The prenup has a sunset clause, 7 years of marriage, and I get half of everything acquired during that time. Your father's assets? They were transferred to the family trust while we were married. Harlan folded the papers without reading further. You've done your homework. I had good teachers. Her smile was sharp as winter. You're out, Harlan. The house, the business interests, the foundation is mine now. Behind her, Romy and Darian approached. His 17-year-old daughter walked with the defiant posture of someone who believed the world owed her justice. Darian, 15, kept his eyes on his phone, but Harlan caught the occasional glance measuring, uncertain. Dad, Romy said, her voice tight with rehearsed anger. We need to tell you something. Then tell me. We're changing our last name to Weller. Knox is more of a father to us than you ever were. Harlan studied his daughter's face. She expected shock, maybe pain. Instead, he nodded once. Your choice, he said. Darian looked up from his phone, confusion flickering across his features. That's it? You don't care? I care about consequences, Harlan replied. You'll learn what yours are. Brielle's smile widened. There's nothing to learn. They'll be provided for. We all will. She turned to leave, then paused. The funeral reception is at the house. Our house. You're not welcome. Harlan watched them walk away, his wife, his children, his former life. When they were gone, he pulled out his phone and dialed. Connie? It's Harlan. We need to meet. Tonight. The Creed mansion sat on 12 acres of prime Asheville real estate, its stone facade and wraparound porches speaking to old Southern money. Harlan had grown up in those rooms, learned to shoot on that land, buried his mother in the family cemetery beyond the oak grove. Now he sat in his truck at the main gate, watching cars fill the circular drive. Through the windows, he could see guests moving between rooms that no longer belonged to him. His phone buzzed. Knox Weller's face filled the screen, a stock photo from his motivational speaking website. Harlan let it ring. The second call came 30 seconds later. This time he answered. Harlan. Knox's voice boomed with practiced enthusiasm. Brother, I know this is a tough day, but we need to talk. Man to man. I'm listening. Look, nobody wanted things to go this way. But Brielle, she's been hurting for years. You shut her out, shut the kids out. A woman needs to feel valued, you know? Harlan started his engine. Is there a point to this conversation? The point is healing. The point is family. These kids need stability, and Brielle needs support. I can provide that. You can provide her lifestyle, Harlan corrected. There's a difference. Knox's laugh sounded forced. Money isn't everything, brother. Sometimes a man needs to step aside for the greater good. And sometimes a man needs to understand what he's actually dealing with. Harlan ended the call and drove toward town. 3 hours later, he sat across from Connie Slate in her downtown office. The lawyer had worked for Ernie Creed for 28 years, handling everything from land acquisitions to tax shelters. She was the only person who knew every detail of the Creed financial empire. She moved fast, Connie said, spreading documents across her desk. Filed the divorce petition the day after your father went into hospice. The property transfers started a week before that. Harlan studied the paperwork. Brielle had been thorough. The main house, the downtown office building, 3 rental properties, and the majority stake in Creed Development all shifted into her control through a combination of legal maneuvering and the prenup sunset clause. How did she access the family trust? Your children's testimony, Connie replied. They swore in depositions that you were emotionally abusive, never violent, but cold, distant, controlling. Combined with the prenup terms and North Carolina's equitable distribution laws, the judge granted her temporary control pending the divorce proceedings. And my father never saw this coming. Connie reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. He saw it coming 15 years ago. She broke the wax seal and removed a document. Your father's original will. The one he filed with me in 2010, but never formally revoked. He was paranoid about gold diggers, Harlan, especially after your mother died. Harlan read the first page. The language was precise, unforgiving. A contingency clause, he said. If any family member renounces the Creed name or acts against the interests of the estate, they forfeit all inheritance rights. Everything reverts to the primary beneficiary. Me, you. Harlan set the document down. Why didn't you produce this earlier? Because your father's later will supersede it. But that was written when he thought Brielle was trustworthy. This one was written when he thought she wasn't. And legally, the later will never formally revoke this one. It exists in parallel. If I can prove Brielle's actions constitute acting against the estate's interest, fraud, forgery, misrepresentation, then this will become active again. Harlan stood and walked to the window. Downtown Asheville spread below them. The lights of restaurants and shops where his family's money had built half the buildings. We don't fight in court, he said. We strike from the shadows. Connie smiled. What do you need? Harlan drove past the mansion one more time before heading to the guest house. The smaller building sat on the far edge of the property, originally built for his grandparents in their final years. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a view of the mountains that his father had always said was worth more than money. Tonight, it was his refuge and his base of operations. He unpacked his single suitcase with military precision clothes hung by type and color, toiletries arranged in order of use, documents filed in a metal briefcase that could survive a hurricane. Everything he owned now fit in 200 square feet. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Brielle, 3 from Knox, and 47 text messages he deleted without reading. There was also an email from his sister Opal with the subject line, "What the hell is happening?" He called her back. "Jesus Christ, Harlan," she answered on the first ring. "I heard about the divorce at the hardware store." At the hardware store. News travels fast. Don't give me that calm bullshit. Brielle's telling everyone you're broke and homeless. Knox is posting on social media about new beginnings and found family. What's your plan? Opal had always been direct. At 38, she ran the largest construction company in western North Carolina and had no patience for politics or manipulation. She was also the only person who had ever called Brielle out to her face. My plan is to let them think they've won, Harlan said. Have they? No. There was a pause. What do you need? Information. Financial records. Evidence of fraud if it exists. It exists, Opal said. I've been watching Brielle's spending for 2 years. Designer handbags that cost more than trucks. Knox's coaching business that never seems to have actual clients. Art pieces that show up in the house and disappear again. Can you prove it? Give me a week. Harlan ended the call and opened his laptop. The screen displayed his personal accounts modest compared to the family wealth, but substantial enough to fund a war that he spent the next 3 hours researching Knox Weller's business dealings, Brielle's financial history, and the legal precedents for challenging estate transfers. By midnight, he had a strategy. By morning, he would begin implementing it. The phone rang again. This time the number was unfamiliar. Mr. Creed? This is Detective Mills with Asheville PD. We need to speak with you about some irregularities in your father's estate documentation. Harlan smiled for the first time in days. The guest house became Harlan's command center. He cleared the dining table and spread out 20 years of family financial records, legal documents, and business correspondence. 3 whiteboards covered one wall, mapping connections between bank accounts, property transfers, and suspicious transactions. Detective Mills had visited that morning with questions about forged notary signatures on several property transfers. Someone had been sloppy to Harlan's laptop chimed with an encrypted message from Connie. Found the smoking gun. Meet me at 2 p.m. He was reviewing Ernie's personal correspondence when the pattern emerged. His father's handwriting showed increasing paranoia over the past 5 years' notes about protecting the legacy and watching for predators. One letter, dated 18 months ago, contained a single underlined phrase. She's playing the long game. His phone buzzed. Opal, I've got bank records, she said without preamble. Knox took out a $600,000 line of credit 3 months ago, using the mansion as collateral. The money went to something called Weller Enterprises, which doesn't actually exist. Fraud. Gets better. I traced Brielle's spending through her credit cards. She's been buying art through a gallery in Charlotte, then selling the pieces to private collectors for cash. No tax reporting, no paper trail. Money laundering. And there's more. Remember that family vacation to Europe last year? She charged $30,000 to the family foundation's account, listed it as cultural research. Harlan made notes on the whiteboard. The web of financial crimes was more extensive than he'd expected. At 2 o'clock, he met Connie at her office. She looked grim. Your father kept detailed records, she said, sliding a folder across the desk. Every conversation with Brielle about money, every request for access to accounts, every suspicious transaction. He documented everything. Harlan opened the folder. 60 pages of notes in Ernie's careful handwriting, each entry dated and signed. He knew she was stealing. He suspected, but he also knew that moving against her would destroy the family. So he waited, documented, and planned. Plan what? Connie handed him another document, a codicil to his original will, signed 2 weeks before he died. It specifically references any family member who engages in financial fraud or misrepresentation for personal gain. If proven, they forfeit all claims to the estate. He set a trap. And she walked right into it. Opal arrived at the guest house that evening with a box of financial records and a bottle of bourbon. She poured 2 drinks and studied the evidence boards Harlan had constructed. This is impressive, she said. You should have been a detective instead of a Marine. Different kind of war, same principles. She picked up a bank statement. Knox is dumber than I thought. He used the mansion's equity for some kind of self-help seminar franchise. Paid $200,000 for the rights to sell authentic leadership experiences in 3 states. Does the business exist? On paper. In reality, it's a pyramid scheme. He's been recruiting coaches who pay him for training materials that don't exist. Harlan added Knox's fraud to the growing list. What about the children's testimony? I talked to Romy's art teacher. Apparently, Brielle's been filling her head with stories about emotional abuse for months. Coached her on what to say to the lawyers. Witness tampering and child manipulation. Opal's voice carried the edge it got when she discussed contractors who cheated their workers. That woman needs to burn. Harlan's phone rang. Connie, we have a problem, the lawyer said. Brielle filed for emergency custody. She's claiming you're unstable and potentially dangerous. Based on what? Your military background, your history of emotional abuse, and the fact that you're living in what she describes as substandard conditions. She wants the children removed from any contact with you pending psychiatric evaluation. Harlan looked around the guest house. Clean, furnished, well-maintained, but smaller than the mansion's wine cellar. When's the hearing? Tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. I'll be there. After ending the call, Harlan poured another drink and studied the evidence boards. Brielle was moving aggressively, trying to cut off all his advantages before he could strike back. She's scared, Opal said. She should be. The custody hearing lasted 3 hours. Brielle arrived with Knox and a lawyer who specialized in high-asset divorces. She wore conservative clothing and makeup that emphasized her role as a concerned mother protecting her children from an unstable father. Harlan represented himself, presenting financial records that showed his ability to provide for the children and character references from his military commanders and business associates. The judge split the difference supervised visitation only, pending psychological evaluation for all parties. Outside the courthouse, Romy confronted him in the parking lot. "Are you happy now?" she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You're destroying our family." "Your family was destroyed the day your mother decided to steal from it," Harlan replied. "She didn't steal anything. She protected us from you." "Did she tell you about the $600,000 Knox borrowed against the house? Or the art fraud? Or the money she took from your grandfather's foundation?" Romy's confidence wavered. "You're lying." "I don't lie. Ask her about it." Knox appeared behind Romy, his arms sliding around her shoulders in a gesture that was meant to be protective but looked possessive. "Hey there, kiddo," he said to Harlan. "Maybe dial back the aggression? This is hard enough on everyone." "You're right," Harlan said. "It is hard, especially when you're about to lose everything you stole." Knox's smile tightened. "I didn't steal anything, brother. I provided love and support when it was needed most. You provided financial fraud and witness tampering. The FBI tends to view those differently." The color drained from Knox's face. "FBI, forged documents, money laundering, mail fraud, wire fraud. The federal government takes financial crimes very seriously." Harlan walked away, leaving Knox and Romy standing in stunned silence. That evening, he attended Romy's art exhibition at a downtown gallery. The event was funded by Brielle's Cultural Foundation, another suspicious entity that Opal had uncovered. Harlan stood in the back of the room, observing that Romy's paintings showed talent, but no focus abstract pieces that spoke to confusion rather than artistic vision. The price tags were astronomical for a 17-year-old's work, clearly inflated by Brielle's social connections. "Why do you even come?" Romy had approached him while he studied a painting titled Broken Promises. "I always protect what's mine," he said, "even if you don't understand what that means yet. I'm not yours anymore. None of us are. Names can be changed. Blood can't." She stared at him, searching for emotion that wasn't there. "Don't you feel anything? Don't you care that we hate you? I care that you've been lied to. I care that you're being used as weapons against your own family. And I care that you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices." "What consequences?" "You'll find out." Connie filed the injunction on a Thursday morning. By noon, all real estate and business assets tied to Ernie's original trust were frozen pending investigation. Brielle's lawyer called Harlan within an hour. "Your wife is willing to negotiate," the man said. "Perhaps we can reach an amicable settlement." "My wife should have thought about that before committing multiple felonies," Harlan replied. The auditor arrived at the mansion that afternoon, a thin man with thick glasses who examined every document, every transaction, every questionable financial decision made in the past 2 years. Knox tried to charm him, offering coffee and small talk about the house's history. The auditor ignored him and continued working. Harlan watched from the guest house as panic set in. Knox made 17 phone calls in 2 hours, pacing the mansion's front porch with increasingly agitated gestures. Brielle's car disappeared for 3 hours, then returned with shopping bags that suggested she was converting assets to cash. Darian called that evening. "Dad, what's happening?" "Mom's crying, and Knox is talking about taking a business trip." "Knox is running," Harlan said. "Men like him always run when they get caught." "Caught doing what?" "Ask your mother. She won't tell me anything. She just keeps saying you're trying to destroy us. I'm trying to save what's left of our name. You threw it away, but it's still worth saving." It was a long pause. "Did we make a mistake?" "You made a choice. Mistakes can be corrected. Choices have consequences. The call ended. Harlan returned to his evidence boards, adding new information from the auditor's preliminary findings. The web of fraud was even more extensive than he'd suspected. Knox had used the Creed name to secure credit from 6 different institutions, borrowing against assets he didn't know. WN.BY morning. The consequences would begin. Brielle's housewarming party was scheduled for Saturday evening, a celebration of her new independence and fresh start. She had invited 200 guests, including most of Asheville's social elite. Harlan hired a courier. The man arrived at 8 o'clock, just as appetizers were being served. He asked for Brielle by name, requiring her signature for delivery. The conversation stopped as she signed for the manila envelope. "What is it?" Knox asked, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Brielle opened the envelope and read the first document. Her face went white. "What the hell did you do?" Knox demanded, grabbing the papers. The documents were comprehensive. Cease and desist order on use of Creed Foundation funds, notification of breach of trust, and asset seizure, civil suit for $1.4 million in damages and fraud, subpoena for forged signatures and financial misrepresentation, criminal referral to the FBI for money laundering and wire fraud. Knox read through the stack, his hands shaking. This can't be legal." "It's very legal," Brielle said, her voice barely above a whisper. The guests had formed a circle around them, sensing drama but not understanding its scope. Phones appeared, social media posts that would spread the news across Asheville's elite within hours. "Ladies and gentlemen," Knox announced, his motivational speaker training kicking in despite the circumstances. "There's been a misunderstanding. Some paperwork issues that will be resolved quickly." But his smile looked sick, and sweat had appeared on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. Mrs. Patterson, Asheville's premier gossip, stepped forward. "Brielle, dear, is everything all right?" Brielle forced a smile. "Just some legal technicalities. Harlan's trying to complicate the divorce, but it will work out." "Will it?" The voice came from the back of the room. Harlan stepped through the crowd, still wearing the black suit from his father's funeral. He looked like judgment incarnate. "You weren't invited," Brielle said. "Neither was the FBI," Harlan replied. "But they'll be here Monday morning." Knox tried to position himself between Harlan and the crowd. "Now hold on there, brother. Let's not make a scene in front of friends. These people aren't your friends. They're your victims. Half of them invested in your pyramid scheme." Murmurs erupted from the crowd. Mr. Davidson, who owned 3 car dealerships, stepped forward. "What pyramid scheme?" "Weller Enterprises," Harlan said. "The authentic leadership experience franchise that Knox sold you for $50,000. It doesn't exist." Davidson's face reddened. "Knox, is this true?" Knox's smile finally cracked. "There have been some delays in implementation, but it's fraud," Harlan continued. "Just like the $600,000 he borrowed against this house without owning it. Just like the art laundering scheme. Just like the foundation money Brielle spent on personal vacations." The room erupted in shocked conversations. Several guests headed for the exits. Others pulled out phones to call lawyers. Brielle stood frozen in the center of it all, the legal documents scattered around her feet. "You've destroyed everything," she whispered. "I've exposed everything," Harlan corrected. "You destroyed it yourself." Knox was backing toward the door, but Opal appeared behind him with 2 off-duty police officers. "Going somewhere?" she asked. The party dissolved into chaos. By midnight, the mansion was empty except for Brielle, sitting alone in the living room surrounded by the ruins of her celebration. Harlan found her there when he came to retrieve some of his father's personal items. "I loved you once," she said without looking up. "No," he replied. "You loved what I represented. There's a difference." He walked upstairs to his father's study and began packing books that would never be replaced. Knox Weller disappeared on a Sunday night, leaving behind a closet full of expensive suits and a bathroom counter covered with abandoned grooming products. Brielle found his note on the kitchen island Monday morning. "Had to handle some business in Arizona. Back soon. Love you." She called his number 17 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. WY Tuesday. Rumors swept through Asheville like wildfire. Knox had been spotted at the Charlotte airport with 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket to Phoenix. His coaching business website had been scrubbed clean. The post office box he'd rented for Weller Enterprises was abandoned. Brielle sat in the mansion's main room, surrounded by legal documents she couldn't afford to fight and bills she couldn't pay. The accounts were frozen. The credit cards were maxed out. The line of credit Knox had secured was now in default, with the bank demanding immediate payment of $600,000. Her lawyer called Wednesday morning with news that made her stomach turn. "They're seizing the house," he said. "The bank that holds Knox's credit line filed for immediate foreclosure. Since the loan was secured with fraudulent documentation, they're treating it as theft." "How long do I have?" 30 days. Maybe less. She called Knox again. This time a recorded message informed her that the number was no longer in service. Harlan watched from the guest house as moving trucks arrived Thursday afternoon. Brielle had hired a discount company to pack her belongings, a far cry from the white glove service she'd used during better times. Romy and Darian helped load boxes, their faces showing confusion rather than anger. They were beginning to understand the scope of what had happened, the magnitude of what they'd lost. "Where'll we go?" Darian asked his mother. "I have a friend in Charlotte," Brielle replied. "We can stay there while I figure things out." But Harlan knew she was lying. Her friends had stopped returning calls once news of the fraud investigation became public. Social pariah was a role she'd never learned to play. Darian's email arrived Friday night. "Dad, I didn't know about the money stuff. I thought you just didn't care about any of us. Knox said you were too proud to show emotion, but that you loved us inside. Now I think he was lying about everything. I don't know what to believe anymore. Can we talk?" Harlan stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding. Saturday, 2 p.m., guest house. Darian arrived on time, riding the old bike he'd kept in the mansion's garage. He looked smaller than his 15 years, uncertain in a way that reminded Harlan of his own youth. "Mom says you're trying to destroy our family," Darian began. "Your family was destroyed the moment you chose someone else's name," Harlan replied. "But we can change it back, right? We can fix this. Names aren't clothing, son. You don't change them based on convenience." Darian's face flushed. "So you're just going to abandon us? Because we made one mistake. I'm going to let you live with the consequences of your choices. The world doesn't forgive mistakes because you're sorry you made them." That's cold. Cold is accurate. Your mother stole from your grandfather's legacy. Knox defrauded dozens of investors. You both chose to support criminals over family. Those are facts, not emotions. Darian sat quietly for several minutes, processing information that contradicted everything he'd been told. "What about college?" he finally asked. "What about it? Will I still be able to go?" "That depends on you. Your grandfather's original will include education funds for all grandchildren who maintain academic standards and moral character. You threw away the name, but the blood remains." Hope flickered in Darian's eyes. "What I need to do? Graduate. Stay out of trouble. Prove you understand the difference between family and convenience." Sunday afternoon brought Romy. She arrived without calling, her car loaded with art supplies and suitcases. "I need to stay here," she announced. "No, Mom's living in a studio apartment. There's no room for me, and I can't afford my own place. You should have considered that before choosing Weller over Creed." Romy's composure cracked. "I was 17. I believed what Mom told me. You believed what you wanted to believe. There's a difference. So you're just going to be homeless. I'm going to let you figure out what your choices cost." She stared at him, tears forming but not falling. "Don't you feel anything? Any love for your own daughter?" "I feel disappointed. I feel angry that you were so easily manipulated. And I feel sorry that you'll have to learn the hard way that actions have consequences. I hate you. You hated me before any of this happened. Now you just have a better reason." Romy left without another word. Through the window, Harlan watched her sit in her car for 20 minutes before finally driving away. His phone rang that evening. "Opal, the kids came to see me," she said. "They're scared. They should be. Romy's staying with friends, bouncing between couches. Darian's working at a grocery store to help his mother pay rent. Good. Work builds character. Jesus, Harlan, they're still your children. They're Brielle's children. They made that choice clear." There was a long pause. "What if they want to come back? Then they'll have to earn it." The trial began on a Tuesday morning in November. The courthouse was packed with reporters, curiosity seekers, and investors who'd been defrauded by Knox's schemes. Brielle arrived wearing a borrowed suit and the desperate look of someone who'd run out of options. Knox was arrested in Las Vegas 3 days before the trial, caught trying to start another pyramid scheme using a different name. He'd agreed to testify against Brielle in exchange for a reduced sentence. Connie Slate presented the evidence with surgical precision. Financial records showing systematic theft. Forged documents with Brielle's signature. Bank statements proving money laundering. Knox's testimony detailing how they'd planned to strip the Creed estate of everything valuable. Mrs. Creed didn't just steal money, Connie told the jury. She stole a legacy. She manipulated children to lie under oath. She perverted justice to satisfy greed. Brielle's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim, a neglected wife driven to desperation by an emotionally abusive husband. But the evidence was overwhelming. Phone records showed months of planning. Financial records showed systematic theft. Knox's testimony revealed the scope of their conspiracy that on the witness stand, Brielle broke down completely. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed. "I just wanted security for my children." "You wanted luxury for yourself," Connie countered. "At what cost? I loved him once. I really did." Love doesn't steal a dead man's legacy. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes, guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence was comprehensive. Full restitution to all victims, forfeiture of all assets obtained through fraud, and 2 years in federal prison. The mansion would be sold to pay damages. The Children's Education Trust, which had been protected under Ernie's original will, would be controlled by Harlan until each child reached 25. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Harlan with questions he didn't answer. He walked to his truck and drove home in silence. Spring brought changes to Asheville. The mansion sold at auction to a tech executive from California who planned to turn it into a meditation retreat. Knox received 18 months in federal prison and a lifetime ban from operating investment schemes. Brielle served 8 months before being released to a halfway house in Charlotte. Harlan learned about her release from a private investigator he'd hired to monitor her activities. The report included a photograph of her leaving the halfway house wearing thrift store clothes and walking to a job at a catering company. "She's working as a server," the investigator reported. "Weddings, corporate events, charity functions. The same events she used to attend as a guest." Harlan filed the report without comment. Romy sent a graduation announcement in June. She'd finished high school while staying with friends and earned a scholarship to study art at UNC. The scholarship covered tuition, but not living expenses, Darian called that same week. "I enlisted," he said without preamble. "Which branch?" "Navy. I leave for boot camp in August." "Good choice. I wanted to tell you before I go. I understand now what you meant about consequences." "Do you?" "Mom destroyed everything because she wanted more than she deserved. Knox used us because we were stupid enough to let him. We chose the wrong side because it felt easier. And now I want to earn back what I threw away." The name means something, doesn't it? "It means everything." There was a long pause. "Will you be there when I graduate boot camp?" "I'll be there." The call ended with more hope than Harlan had felt in months. October brought the dedication of a new Creed Foundation, building a gleaming structure downtown that would house programs for veterans and young entrepreneurs. Harlan stood at the podium looking out at 500 guests, including business leaders, politicians, and the families of men and women who'd served their country. "My father believed in legacy," he began. "Not the kind built on inheritance or privilege, but the kind earned through service and sacrifice. This foundation will honor that belief." In the crowd, he spotted Darian in his Navy dress uniform, home on leave from his first deployment. Their eyes met, and Darian nodded, once a gesture of respect between men who understood duty. Romy wasn't there. She was studying in Europe on a program funded by her art scholarship. She sent a card instead. "Congratulations on the foundation. Maybe someday I'll understand what you were trying to teach us." Maybe. After the ceremony, Harlan drove to the cemetery. Ernie's headstone was simple granite with dates and a single phrase. "He built what lasted." "The legacy's secure," Harlan said to the stone. "Cost more than either of us expected, but it's secure." A cold wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of winter. Harlan stood there for 10 minutes, then walked back to his truck. The creed name would survive. It would be earned again, one generation at a time, by people who understood that inheritance was a privilege to be honored, not a right to be exploited. Justice wasn't forgiveness. Justice was consequences, and consequences, Harlan had learned, were the only teacher that never lied.